Did you miss round 15 of Super Rugby and you want to hear what my opinion is on what happened? It's coming right up. As I said, round 15 of Super Rugby is done. There were some crucial victories for some teams in all the conferences. The Superbru side, the winner of the weekend in the predictor was me. I got 7 out of 7 for the week. And the leader for the pool is still Spoon. If you want to join the pool, look in the description below. We'll love to have you as well. Let's get into the games for the week. The Chiefs won by 19 to 13 to the Reds. The Chiefs passed the Blues now in their New Zealand conference, and they're only 2 points behind the Highlanders. The Chiefs were great on defense, especially at the end of the game. The Chiefs made a whopping 262 tackles throughout that game. I think it's the most by any team in the season so far. The Reds actually had 65% of the possession of the ball, but they just could not capitalize on it. The Chiefs' defense was pretty strong. Again in this match, the TMO, there were some talks of him. He disallowed a try that was scored in the corner because of a knockdown or a knock-on by the winger of the Chiefs. Look, if you look in slow-mo, it is clearly a knock-on, and you can say, oh, he dropped the ball and he wasn't in control of the ball when he scored. But it actually raises the question, should TMOs only go on the slow-mo, or should they actually go on the real-time view as well? Because on real-time you wouldn't even see that little bit of a drop. So we'll have to talk about that, or they'll have to talk about that. Let me know what your thoughts about that is. Then the Reds, they may have too much ground to make up now in the Australian pool. They are fourth with 24. The Rebels have 33. That might just be too much ground to make up for them to reach a playoff spot. Then it was the Brumbies going 22 to 10 over the Bulls. The star of the show, Kuridrani, he scored a hat-trick in that game. The Bulls, they lost 2 spots in the South African Conference. They are now in 3rd, but they are 4 points behind the Jaguares, who are in 1st place. The Brumbies, after this win, they are now 1 point ahead of the Rebels in the Australian Conference after the Rebels had a good game over the Sunwolves. The Brumbies, they really struggled against the forwards of the Bulls in the first half, but the problem with the Bulls were their backline. They didn't really have an edge in that game, and they also didn't have the best defense on the fringes. The backs of the Brumbies actually capitalized on that. They always went into the wide channels to get around the defense of the Bulls, and eventually they forced 16 missed tackles from the Bulls in that game. Lealifano, the big question, he missed 4 kicks in that game, which wouldn't be ideal for him. He has pretty high standards, but mostly this game was pretty entertaining. I did predict a win for the Brumbies, so I feel pretty chuffed with that one. So far for the week, all the South African pool results went as I predicted in my other video of who will win the SA Conference. I'll link it up here. Then the next game was the Sunwolves going down to the Rebels 7 to 52. The season continues to crumble for the Sunwolves. They did not have a good game. They only had 40% possession. They conceded 27 turnovers in that game and missed 23 tackles. So it was not a good game for them. The Rebels, as I said, they shouldn't be happy from this game if they didn't get a bonus point. They did manage to get that, so they are just 1 point behind the Brumbies. The Sunwolves are playing the Brumbies next, so the Brumbies will try to do the same as the Rebels this week, where the Rebels are facing the Waratahs, who are 7 points behind them. So if they could beat the Waratahs, they will probably secure their spot in a playoff position. This was a try-fest. Currier Betty, Maddox had good games with the ball. fantasy team, I had the 2 players in this team that didn't score tries. I had Will Kenya and Reece Hodge. Then it was the New Zealand derby. It was a pretty hard fought affair. The Crusaders beating the Blues 19-11. It was closer than I thought it would be, but Mahunga really kept the Blues back in their own half by kicking the ball into their own 22 the whole time. The Crusaders, they also had a better set piece than the Blues, and that's ultimately what forced the Crusaders over the line or into a penalty position a couple of times. The Crusaders had 57% possession of the ball, but they weren't their best this week. We usually expect better from them. The Blues, in the prediction video, I said I was scared for them, and I thought the Crusaders are gonna come out firing after their draw last week against the Stormers. The Blues, they are still only 3 points behind the Highlanders in 3rd place, and New Zealand may only have 2 teams going into the playoffs as things stands at the moment. The Blues will really kick themselves for this game after allowing a penalty in the 77th minute where Mahunga kicked it over and sealed the victory for the Crusaders, and ultimately not disallowing a bonus point for the Blues. The Waratahs versus the Jaguares. The Jaguares beating the Waratahs 23-15. The Waratahs, they were just behind from the get-go in the game. Their attack lacked the punch that it needed to outplay the Jaguares defense. And what Hooper said in an interview this week, which was pretty interesting, the Waratahs haven't been ahead after the 70th minute in a game in a couple of weeks, or I think he said the whole season. Sorry if I missed that one, but it was something like that. Then the Jaguares, they looked set to fulfill my prediction in who would win the South African conference. Like I said, it's linked up there already, and they are first in the conference now, leading by 3 points. They outplayed the Waratahs completely, but as always with the Jaguares, there were some discipline issues, some unnecessary tackles, high tackles, or someone coming in from the side of the ruck. Things like that usually happens with them. It's often the case that they allow a lot of penalties. At the end, the Jaguares, they showed some champion attributes by being ruthless and taking the penalty at goal and denying the Waratahs a bonus point lose. Moyano, he really stood out in that game, scoring 2 tries, and he was just at the ball all the time. Then it was the Stormers beating the Highlanders 34-22, and the Stormers pretty much outclassed the Highlanders in this one. It was the same intensity they had last week against the Crusaders in this one, and there were great performances all over the park by players like Visa, Kulisi, Kutsia, Yankees, the Islander, and Sanatla, and that's why they actually won this game. Yankees, there's still talks of him becoming a Springbok. I know he has been in a Springbok alignment camp once this year, and yes, I don't see the reason why not, unless you want to bring in a guy like Reinach, because he's been in amazing form as well. So that might be the only reason for Yankees not making it to the Springbok camp. Because it is quite a difficult situation for us to predict as South Africans, because we don't really know how many European-based players Rassie is going to pick. Maybe the only standout performance from the Highlanders, Naholo. I remember the one massive bump off he had on Damian Willemse, where he just flew backwards like 1 or 2 meters, and Naholo really had a good game. He scored his first try this season after he's been injured a bit again, as has been the story for the last couple of seasons. The Highlanders, they now opened the gate for the Blues and the Chiefs to see if they can beat the Highlanders or get the spot of the Highlanders in 3rd of the New Zealand conference. They are just leading them by 1 or 2 points, if I'm not mistaken. The Highlanders, they had a bunch of high tackles around the neck, which really gave unnecessary ball to the Stormers, and the Stormers capitalized on that. The possession though was 50-50, so it was pretty even, but at the end the Highlanders defense was actually better than the Stormers as well. If you look at the amount of missed tackles, I don't have the stat here, but I think the Stormers missed 24 tackles in that game. The Stormers, they conceded a lot of handling errors with the ball, which was a little bit bad for them. A lot of them were at ruck time or at mauls, so they need to learn to secure the ball a little bit better when you get to set pieces. The injury worries for the Stormers: Kulisi, Dutoy and Mtubeni looked injured in that one, so they will be worried for their next game against the Lions for those bigger players. Then it was the Sharks against the Lions, 27-17 for the Sharks. It was a crucial victory in the South African Conference for the Sharks. The Sharks now are third in the conference, within 3 points from the top at the Jaguares and 3 from the bottom, the Stormers. So the South African pool is still very much alive after this week. Bosch, he contributed 17 points to the 27 of the Sharks, and he is still putting up his hand to Rassie Erasmus and telling him, listen, I can also become a Springbok. Yeah, he has been in great form. He's probably the in-form number 10 if it isn't for Pollard at this moment for Springbok rugby. But Bosch, he has the tendency to every now and then have a very poor game, or on defense he gets exposed a lot. So he could be picked, but they need to work on those aspects for him, and then I'm happy with him because he's a very big attacking threat for any side. Then the Lions, they are now second to last in the South African Conference. They have 30. The Stormers also have 30 points, but the Lions have just scored a couple of more points throughout the season. They play the Stormers next week in Johannesburg, and that's also going to be a massive South African derby. Again, the side that wins there or the side that loses there is going to be at the bottom of the conference after next weekend's rugby. The Lions, they did better when they had possession, but they actually struggled a lot against the Sharks, who tended to be very flat on them with a little bit of a rushed defense, and the Lions struggled to handle that. Yankees especially struggled to handle that, giving 2 intercept passes in this game, and both of those intercepts went on to get tries. So actually the Lions had more of the ball, 60%. The Sharks just hung in there, waited for an intercept and scored from there. The Lions defense was actually superb. They only missed 1 tackle in that whole game, which is amazing stats. That's what happened this week of Super Rugby. If you want to check out the channel, you can subscribe, press the bell icon, and then you'll get notified whenever I post anything. Please go check out the Facebook page in the description below, and join the Superbru pools also in the description. Cheers.